Alright everyone, it's time for Vermont Issues, episode 30, a Vermont man spraying an immigration and customs enforcement car, actually, with liquefied manure. I would like to first say this, the concept of manuring things that you don't like, that has happened at other times here in Vermont. It's also happened elsewhere. I know sometimes farmers, for instance, when they get screwed by a bank, they'll take their manuring vehicle and they'll go and spray the whole front facade. I've seen footage of that. We also had, I can't remember his actual name, but he took his tractor and crushed a bunch of the state police cars, actually, a couple of years ago up here in Vermont. And some people sort of hailed him as a hero for this because he was kind of not mentally all there. And he had been abused, actually, and so he decided to take out a little revenge. I think they found him unfit to stand trial, actually. I think they basically let him go, and of course, how is he going to pay the restitution? Some farmer dude with a tractor is not going to be able to pay for the cost of, I think it was a dozen police vehicles or something that he crushed. But this isn't a big surprise. On the one hand, I would say this. This is, in my mind, objectively better than beating on people because you happen to have a disagreement with them, like as opposed to someone hauls off and goes and attacks some ICE agents. At least the patrol car was the only thing harmed here, and not irreparably damaged, just very smelly and covered with a sheen of liquid manure. On the other hand, it is a pretty good symbol of what's going on right now, which is that people have begun to openly disdain the rule of law in this country. That goes on all sides. It's now clear that people have become heated enough in this country, polarized enough between these two sort of bullshit camps that don't even truly exist. They're total artifice. They've gotten to the point where they're getting more disrespectful, especially of property. And we see this every day with Antifa. I'm sure we're going to start seeing it with certain far-right groups. That's a prediction. We're going to start seeing that, unfortunately, as things continue. I mean, look, do you think that what's happening right now is normal, or that it should be normal, what's happening in our country? Apparently, this was over immigration enforcement in general, and I think you'll probably see more of this. I feel sorry for all of the police in this country that are going to have to deal with this shit. Because increasingly they're going to face, unfortunately, I think, attacks from the fringe on both sides. There are going to be people, doing the normal pelting them with rocks. There will probably be more violence than that as well. And a general disrespect for property. Of course, if you've got an immigration's enforcement car, that was paid for by the taxpayers. It's not some immigration agent didn't themselves out of pocket purchase that vehicle. It's been requisitioned for that cause by the government, and of course the taxpayers are the ones footing the bill. So the taxpayers then have to clean that car off also. You haven't really, you haven't stopped immigration enforcement. I can understand why maybe you'd want to, but you haven't stopped that. You've just made people pay more money. Really, that's also what's happening everywhere else. The taxpayers right now are getting screwed, because militarized police have to march out every time there's a protest at this point to try to prevent at least what violence they're allowed to prevent, even if they're given the order to stand down by Terry McAuliffe or whatever. So they march, that costs a lot of money. They have to operate their helicopters and drones, and the local economy is temporarily strangulated, and everything just sort of falls to shit. So you're going to see more of this. I mean, to see this in Vermont, and this comes on the heels of the Sam Wormer thing. Now, I took my video down about that, by the way, because additional information was given to me on what he was actually saying. It seemed that he was blaming a Nazi false flag for his assault, which I think if the shoe were on the other foot, that would be called conspiracy theory. It'd be called tinfoil hat mode. So maybe take that as you will. But certainly, violence is now metastasized from the inner cities primarily, where many of these rallies and protests and so forth were held. It's gotten worse now, and it's hitting small-town America. People need to be prepared for the fact that we may have to defend our country against this, because the lunatic fringe appears to be rising up, and we see they're starting on both sides to try to browbeat people who are sane into supporting their respective fringe causes. that could become a problem too, because some people will actually take the bait. So that's my real worry. My real worry is not about a few thousand fanatics. My real worry is about many millions of people who might join up with those fanatics because they're convinced that a civil war is breaking out or something. Which would be real convenient for the legacy media because they can clickbait it to everyone who's unaffected and sort of holed up in their house worrying and watching cable news. It's really great for the authoritarians because then they can censor the internet, they can partner more with the corporate media, and they can thrive off that same fear and make all their morally grandstanding statements, like George W. coming out and condemning hate and violence. Yeah, what a wonderful dude. Just forget about that whole Iraq war thing. Just forget about the 500,000 people that died in our so-called struggle to liberate Iraq from the evil Saddam Hussein. I'm a great guy and I condemn hate and violence. Bullcrap. No, he doesn't. He loves hate and violence. So does the media. I also see that intellectual honesty is slowly getting peeled away from members of the alt media. I see a lot of the e-celeb and alt media class now. They're beginning to engage in clickbait, and they're not being honest about what their actual motives are. So we need to be slightly careful, I think, maybe more careful than even a few months ago about who we're getting our information from. Because, and this is not just the far left, by the way. There's plenty of propaganda that has always come from them. It's beginning to affect people that were, they're uprising, like post-election era sort of individuals on the other side. They're beginning to engage in the same thing. Power's gone to their heads, I think, their popularity or whatever. Not going to name names, and there are plenty that are just fine, including some people from the left. I think H.A. Goodman is wonderful, and he's a progressive, self-proclaimed. Somebody like Sargon, who is essentially a classical liberal at the same time. But he shitposts, but he does it proudly. He doesn't pretend that that sort of garbage posting is real. That's sort of intermingled with stuff he wants you to take seriously. So, it's funny. It's humorous, at least. And I see he's become active again, which this is exactly the time that we need everyone to be as active as possible at calling the situation what it is, which is pure chaos, which is going on right now. I'm not surprised that this dude sprayed down the immigration's patrol car with cow manure. Now, if you're aiming that sort of fervor at a bank that's ripped you off, or someone with who you have a personal grievance, I might be a little bit more receptive to it being more funny that you've sprayed their vehicle down with manure than if you're making the taxpayers clean it off, and you're doing that for something that you don't have any personal connection necessarily to the issue at hand. You don't have a personal grievance. You have a perceived collective grievance in solidarity with another group of people. There's a little bit of a difference between the two. You're almost acting on their behalf and robbing them of their ability to act on their own behalf. Some may call that empowering. I say it's slightly patronizing. It's an attempt to grandstand. But yeah, that's what happened. Not a surprise. Not the worst thing that could happen, though. That's sort of Vermont's answer to Charlottesville is some car gets sprayed with manure. Okay, I think it's at least preferable. Yeah, okay, I can deal with that one. It's still regrettable, but it's better than the alternative of people beating each other in the streets, I suppose. That's about all. Peace out.